marketing perspective. So we have a couple more minutes. If we don't have more questions from each other and from the open audience, we can move on to the third paper. Okay, Irem from Wayne State University, and also I see your advisor, right, Dr. Yapra. You are going to present.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to present, yes. Hello, everybody. This is Irem from Wayne State University. My presentation is on morality of globalization, which is also a part of the project that's called my dissertation. So we are interested in the intersection of globalization, its effects, and psychology of consumers. And global consumer culture, which is basically this consumer culture that is born after globalization has been so prevalent around the world, is something that we are interested in with my advisor, Dr. Yaprak. And Arnett from 2002 paper is one of the first marketing academics that proposed globalization affects consumers' identities. Coming from that perspective, we were interested in figuring out and looking at how globalization is affecting consumers' identities. And we look at global identity, how global identity is formed, what impacts global identity. In this paper, which is a small section of my dissertation, we looked at morality and moral identity's impact on global identity. I have conducted 15 different focus groups across the world from different cultures to see the deep reasons behind why people do belong with a community of global people. Why do people basically have global identity? And one of the things that was common across different focus groups was that the consumers and focus group subjects wanted to take moral action and preserve the planet or preserve the society's dignity and or help others. If not help, don't harm others. So this connected really, really well with moral identity, and we collected some data on consumers' moral identity and global identity. And one more thing that is suggested by Dr. Boghossian in literature is that morality impacts people's extent to be able to empathize with others. So we propose that empathy is a mediator in the relationship between moral identity and global identity. And people who have higher moral identity do better empathize with others and therefore do belong more with the rest of the world. So our first hypothesis is people who are more moral are more global in terms of their identities, and our second hypothesis is that empathy mediates this relationship between moral identity and global identity. And in our paper, we show that there's evidence for these two hypotheses, and it is indeed that moral people are more global, and they are that way because they can empathize more with the rest of the world, with the rest of the people.
You're done. That's good. Yes, Victor, you're the first.
Hi, Irem. Thank you for a really interesting project, and probably like difficult to fit into 3 minutes. I want to ask if you could define how you define moral identity, and provide more details on theoretical background and kind of the theoretical lens that you considered, more specific, like theoretical mechanism of the link of moral identity and global identity.
And global, okay. So moral identity is based on an extent amount of literature. There are different scales that are out there to measure moral identity. we used the one that is very commonly used in literature, which is basically giving different moral values to the consumers in the questions, caring, passionate about others. There is a couple I need to, if you look at my summary that I uploaded into the system for this session, the questions may be in there. There is like 6 different characteristics that you show to the people, and then you ask them, do you aspire to be these 6 characteristics or not? Do you consider yourself to be that way or not? So we use that measurement for moral identity part, and I believe it's 6 items. And then for global identity, we use Chulzang and Kare's global identity scale. There's a couple in the literature, but we just took the most recent one, which is 8 questions. It's reduced from their first scale, 8 questions on global identity, which include questions such as, do you belong with the rest of the world? If the world is a family, do you see yourself in it? I may be confusing just a couple of questions with Chulzang and Kare's questions, but they are straightforward, are you a global citizen type of questions. So for global identity, we use both ones.
I have a question regarding the causality of the 3 items you were just mentioning, right? You are about to test the mediation relationship from the moral identity to empathy, and then finally to global identity. Yeah. At first glance, we were saying 2 of the identities, global identity and moral identity, they are both identities first. And how are you going to argue that there is actually a causal relationship between them? I mean, they are already identities being attached to a specific person. How are you going to argue that because that person first grants, certain level of moral identity, then that would actually lead to the build-up of empathy and finally to global identity?
That's a very good question. My answer, basically legitimization of that relationship, would be that a person's morality is formed earlier or earliest because when you are young, you know and learn from your family and from your schooling and from your, nature, whether an action is correct or not, whether you should be caring or not. So those are one of the earliest things that we learn as a child. And surely a psychologist would be better to answer this question. But from the perspective of psychology, that's something that forms earlier than global identity in terms of my proposal, because global identity forms after you're exposed to brands, songs, movies that are from the rest of the world, or when you travel to another country and see that other people are performing things differently than in your culture. They're eating their food differently, or they're eating different food. So I propose that morality forms earlier than global identity in terms of in our lifetime, according to what we're exposed to. That was the logic. I mean, surely a contra reasoning can be put out there and be measured, but our logic was that. And also, secondly, empathy. Empathy happens when we see somebody, when we interact with somebody. So that emotion, actually it is an emotion in literature, happens or does not happen when we encounter something. So we thought it was a good mediation variable, mostly because of what consumers have told us, what our subjects had told us. They would say things like, oh, like I don't want to consume plastics. I always try to consume or carry my glass bottle around with me because I don't want to like contribute to the waste in the world. Or some of them say things like, oh, I don't buy from child labor. I try to donate money when I see a homeless on the street. So these interactions suggested that they have a moral identity where they believe what is right and what is wrong. And when they interact with someone in hardship or someone that is being molested or someone that is being treated unfairly, they empathize and then they react. So that was our logic behind the relationship.
Thank you. We were saying Dr. Griffiths providing another interesting question, but Dr. Yaprak just helped you answer. If you have any additional answer to his question, feel free to add. You can answer live.
Yeah, so basically David is asking, given the different philosophical approaches to morality, what is moral can be argued to be quite different. Does using a specific operationalization adhere to one and not others? And what Dr. Yaprak suggested is that we should actually have operationalization in our paper because we don't have one right now. And he says he thinks operationalization of one may lead to missing important conceptualizations to morality. I agree. So we can definitely build this paper to indeed even have experiments around, different scenarios and see how people react, and then measure morality of consumers in terms of whatever we propose is right or not in terms of how they perceive it, measure their empathy, and then measure their global identity, so we can look further into what their right and wrong is. But we did a very preliminary research to just see if there was any relationship for now.
Great. If we have a follow-up, you have to stay work in this area. Good luck.
David is saying morality in international marketing is very important. We need more work on it. Thank you, David. Thanks a lot.
You have a minute? Yes, go ahead. Dr. Yaprak, are you going to say something?
No.
You just pop up in the session.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank David for this excellent point, excellent question. And he's absolutely right. We need more work in our field, in our specialization especially, on morality and morality's role or influence on purchase decisions. There is some work, but it's certainly not sufficient, in my opinion, for us to learn from. So this is, in fact, one of the reasons why we included this as part of Irem's dissertation. So thank you.
Yeah, I have a quite small question regarding the dynamic nature of person's morality. I was thinking, do you think or do you agree that morality is rather a stable characteristic or can grow with the person? Since your argument was kind of related to the early growth or early formation of morality in a person, and hence you are trying to argue that later on they are trying to build up the world of the view and then global identity.
That's another excellent question. So
Beautiful.
both identity theory proposes that any identity is dynamic and fluent. So my just right away answer is that it changes. It changes in terms of context. It changes with time. It changes all the time. Indeed, is global identity. It's the same actually. Tu Zhang and Kara have a study where they prime people with global identity or local identity. One may be more fluent than the other. We can argue either way. However, they are both dynamic and fluent. So more studies looking at what happens when is definitely a future research area. You can do thousands of different scenarios and write thousands of papers on this issue, and not even just connecting to global identity, all other purchase decisions. So just short answer, yes, they are fluent and dynamic. We looked at them at one point in time, but you can prime them with experiments. You can change it, prime it just with a scenario. You can think of many different ways to look at this relationship.
A brief one also, like briefing on building on Dr. Griffith's comment. Really, morality. It's eternal topic going to Greek philosophers, to Aristotle. But also, when you look at morality and the perception of what is moral differs quite a lot across cultures. Like in Western world, there is one set of morality. In Asian world, there is other set of morality. And there is no kind of better or worse. How do you look at this divergence of perception of morality across regions, across cultures?
Thank you for that question. So we actually are actively trying to choose to look at the convergence of morality. So there are things that are certainly right or certainly wrong across the world, right? Stealing is not a good thing, or like treating someone unfairly, child labor, these are not fair things. And if you look at sustainability literature, some already define what is right and what is wrong, and we're trying to see across sustainability literature also is trying to look across the world at the convergence of these rights and wrongs instead of divergence. I agree with you. There is a lot of divergence, but just a very personal opinion, there isn't enough work done in terms of looking at what do we agree on globally right now to go to what are the things that we don't agree on and look at them. I think we should get there, but we haven't gotten there yet. Just like a one sentence note on what we're doing next is actually we are coming up with more comprehensive scale for global identity right now, because we actually saw that morality is integrated in terms of not harming the planet, the things that I've kind of briefly mentioned, or not harming others. So we're trying to just explain global identity better, which does have some morality in it as a concept, as a construct. So again, for that work, we're looking at convergences because there is commonalities, and we want to highlight those first before coming to the differences.
Thank you.
I just want to add, if I have a moment. Each of these comments actually underscores the need for us to bring morality into our work in international marketing. Each one of these comments actually could lead to a paper. There is a lot of literature in sociology on morality, and of course, really very interesting ideas there, but very few in marketing. But one I would recommend in the marketing area, one paper that I would recommend is by Grappi, Romani, and Bagozzi, where they looked at emotions and morality, how they work together in influencing purchase choice. They have several papers, but the one I would recommend is the one in 2013. Grapi, Romani, and Bagos. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna stop.
For the paper citation. Now we have the last but not the least, Ali, presenting to us the fourth paper.